conducted from 1999 to 2003, there's an average of over 30,000 wildlife collisions in Canada every year. Ontario ranked first with 14,000, but Saskatchewan was second with 9,500. By 2010, SGI reported that that number had increased to 13,000, with 8 deaths in our province alone, 4 of which were attributed to moose. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, honorable judges, and fellow 4-Hers. In Saskatchewan, we are provided with driver training through the schools. And although they do a good job of teaching us the rules of the road, it does not necessarily prepare us for all of the potential threats we may be faced with. My parents have always cautioned me that although I may be driving with care, it is essential to be aware of my surroundings. In recent years, we have seen a tremendous increase of moose sightings, and I have been cautioned that hitting a moose can be dangerous as they tend to land on top of the vehicle when struck. Approximately 10% of all wildlife collisions are with moose, and due to their size and stature, there is a significant risk of serious injury or death. It is estimated that 35% of wildlife collisions happen between the hours of 7 and 11 p.m. I had hoped that all of this information would never apply to me, but on June 15, 2012, that all changed. My parents had left for Regina, and I decided to go to the Meadow Lake Stampede with 2 of my friends. The rodeo ended around 10 p.m., and as we left for home, it was already starting to get dark, and was at the time of night where visibility is reduced. If you believe in premonitions, I received 2. The first one was when a check engine warning chimed near Rapid View. About 2 kilometers further down the road, the second warning came, when a huge owl swooped down in front of the vehicle, causing us all to scream. We continued on and were passing through an open flat area, when suddenly, in the middle of the road, we saw a huge black shape. I had no time to react. Within seconds, we had collided. All I remember was closing my eyes, gripping the wheel, and braking hard. It seemed like time sped up and slowed down at the same time. The sounds of glass shattering and metal crunching surrounded us. When all movement stopped, we were in the ditch. I don't even remember putting the car in park. I was out the door and running up the ditch to flag down help. With shaking fingers and blood dripping from my hands, I dialed my grandparents. Grandpa answered immediately, and with fear in his voice, asked if we were all okay. He then said he was on his way. The next call went to Josh, my boyfriend, who reassured me that he would be right there. My third call was probably the hardest of my life. I had to tell my mom and dad I had just totaled their car. My dad was relieved that everyone was all right, but could not visualize the seriousness of the accident. Help arrived almost immediately from people that were also heading home from the stampede. The ambulance came shortly after, and we were transported to the Meadow Lake Hospital to be checked over. My 2 friends were fine, but the glass embedded in my hands had to be removed. My grandparents had to pass the car on their way to the hospital, and when my grandma saw the vehicle, she phoned my dad in tears to tell him how very lucky we had been. The next day, my Uncle Troy and Grandpa loaded the car on a trailer and brought it back to the farm. Troy was not even able to sit in the driver's seat from lack of room without leaning out of the shattered windshield. When my parents got home, they were speechless. They never imagined the extent of damage to the car because of the minor injuries we had sustained. As you can see from these photos, the car was totaled. I had hit 2 yearling moose that were almost side by side on the road. One had bounced up over the cab to crush the back window, shattering it onto the back seat, while the other one had smashed the windshield and peeled back the roof. They were both killed instantly, with one having some of its hide sheared off, and most of it sticking in the edges of the windshield and roof. The injury to my hands were caused by the weight of the moose, shattering the windshield, crushing in the dash, and bending the steering wheel towards me. In a situation like this, it is easy to understand that the difference between life and death can be measured in inches. When Dad called SGI to report the accident, the adjuster asked if there had been any deaths or injuries involved. When Dad informed him that only I had received a few cuts, he assumed that the car must still be drivable. When I gave my statement to the adjuster, he told me that we were very, very lucky, because the last several claims for wildlife collision with moose had resulted in fatalities. Just 1 month after my collision, on July 12, 2012, a lone RCMP officer was traveling along Highway 14 near Wilkie when he collided with a moose and was killed at the scene. As Saskatchewan drivers, we have to contend with not only the conditions of the road, but also sharing that space safely with the ever-increasing amount of wildlife. When your vehicle and a 1,500-pound moose get tangled up, the odds of injury are very high. The concentration of human activity and wildlife leads to a high potential for a wildlife-vehicle collision. When visibility is impaired, slow down and be alert. This threat is very real, and not one of us is immune to this type of situation.